God, why us? Why our family? I have worshipped you. I have prayed to you, and still, you allow this to happen to my children. Where did I go wrong? Why Alex? Why now? Her voice cracked as the tears streamed down her face.
In the heart of a beautiful, bustling city lived Naya and Jack, a couple whose love story was written in patience and faith. For 8 long years, they had waited and prayed for children, trusting in God's timing. Their home, though filled with love, felt incomplete without the laughter of little ones running through it. Every prayer they uttered was a plea for a family. Naya, especially, had dreamed of the day she would hold her child in her arms, and each passing year, without that dream coming true, weighed heavily on her heart. But Naya was resilient. She believed wholeheartedly that God had a plan for her and Jack, even when the years of waiting turned into whispers of doubt. Friends and family had started to ask questions, sometimes with pity in their eyes. "When will you have children?" they would ask, not knowing how deeply it stung. Each question was a reminder of the empty crib that sat in the spare room, untouched and gathering dust. But still, Naya smiled, her faith unwavering. Or at least, that's what she showed the world. Inside, her heart was heavy, filled with the silent question, "When, Lord? When will it be our turn?" Then, as if their years of prayers had finally reached heaven's gates, Naya became pregnant. The news felt like a miracle. Not just one child, but 2 twin boys. The joy that filled their hearts was indescribable. They named their boys Alex and Austin, and from the moment they were born, Naya and Jack's world was transformed. Every night, they thanked God for this incredible blessing. The boys grew, healthy and strong, their laughter filling the house, their tiny voices a reminder that God had indeed heard their prayers. As the twins reached their 3rd birthday, they were full of life. They spoke in short sentences, toddled around the house, played with their toys, and laughed with each other in the way that only twins could. Naya loved watching them interact, often marveling at how blessed she was. Those early years felt like heaven on earth. But soon, something changed, something subtle at first, but alarming nonetheless. One day, Alex stopped speaking. At first, Naya thought it was just a phase. Maybe he was tired, or maybe he was being stubborn, as children sometimes are. But then Austin stopped speaking too. They no longer responded when Naya called their names, and they no longer played with the same enthusiasm as before. A strange silence fell over the house, the once joyous sound of their voices now replaced by an eerie quiet. Worry gnawed at Naya's heart, and she turned to Jack, expressing her fears. Together, they took the boys to the doctor, hoping for a simple explanation. Maybe it was just a mood swing, or maybe they needed more stimulation. But visit after visit, test after test, no answers came. The boys became more withdrawn, avoiding eye contact, and reacting to sounds that no one else seemed to hear. Their world, once filled with the playful giggles of their boys, was now filled with confusion and fear. Naya and Jack tried everything. They prayed, and they prayed hard. They went to their pastor, asking for guidance. They even consulted spiritualists, desperate to find answers. Each time they knelt in prayer, they begged God to bring back the vibrant boys they had once known. But no miracle came. The boys continued to retreat into themselves, their world becoming one of isolation. As they grew more detached, Naya's heart ached in ways she couldn't put into words. It was as if she was slowly losing the children she had longed for all those years. Family and friends offered sympathy, but their words felt empty. The looks of pity they received only made things worse. Naya couldn't help but feel that she was failing as a mother, and she wondered what she had done to deserve this. Why would God give us these children only to take them away in this way? She wondered silently. tears often falling in the quiet of the night when only Jack was there to hold her. Months passed, and the boy's condition didn't improve. After a clinical evaluation, Naya and Jack were advised to see a therapist. Days after they were told the boys are autistic, Naya was devastated. Then came the day that turned their world upside down. Alex, who had always been the quieter of the two, fell seriously ill. His body, already fragile from the withdrawal, could not fight the fever that overtook him. Naya rushed him to the hospital, hoping for a quick recovery. But the doctors' faces told a different story. After a series of tests, the devastating news came. Alex has leukemia. Naya felt as though the floor had been ripped out from beneath her, as if dealing with autism and the silence of her boys wasn't enough. Now her child was facing a battle for his life. She dropped to her knees in the hospital room, her heart breaking into pieces. God, why us? Why our family? I have worshipped you. I have prayed to you, and still you allow this to happen to my children. Where did I go wrong? Why Alex? Why now? Her voice cracked as the tears streamed down her face. Jack beside her, his own heart breaking, but there was nothing he could say to ease her pain. They were in this together, but it felt like a battle they were losing. Alex was admitted to the hospital, and Naya and Jack found themselves living in two different worlds, one where their child was fighting for his life, and the other where they were still trying to care for Austin, who seemed to regress more with each passing day. The therapy they had enrolled him in wasn't making much of a difference. Some days, Austin would have uncontrollable meltdowns, banging his head against the walls, covering his ears, as though he were trying to block out a noise no one else could hear. Other days, he would soil himself, unable to control his basic bodily functions. Naya felt as though she were drowning in sorrow, trying to stay strong for both of her boys, but slowly sinking under the weight of it all. Each day felt heavier than the last. Naya would sit in the hospital, watching other children running and playing in the halls, their laughter a painful reminder of what her own children had lost. She longed for Alex to be healthy again, for Austin to respond to therapy. But each day that passed without change chipped away at her once unshakable faith. Jack, her constant support, tried to remain hopeful, but even he was beginning to crumble under the pressure. One morning, after a particularly difficult night at the hospital where the doctors had told them Alex's condition was deteriorating, Naya stood at the window of their home, staring at the tree in their yard. The leaves were falling one by one, swirling in the wind, and for a moment, it felt like a reflection of her own life, pieces of her faith, her hope falling away. She turned to Jack, tears in her eyes. God has truly abandoned us, she whispered, her voice heavy with despair. Jack tried to comfort her, but even he couldn't find the words to say. They had prayed. They had done everything the doctors and therapists had told them to do, but still nothing seemed to work. Austin's condition was worsening, and Alex was slipping away. It felt like the world was closing in around them, and Naya couldn't see any way out. Then one morning, something strange happened. Naya was in the kitchen, her eyes red from yet another night of crying, when she heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find a beautiful white bird standing on the doorstep. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, its feathers almost glowing in the soft morning light. The bird stood still, staring at her with a calmness that felt almost supernatural. And then, without a sound, it dropped a small piece of paper at her feet before flying away. With trembling hands, Naya picked up the note. Inside, written in delicate handwriting, were the words, "A tree that bends but does not break, a river that flows slowly but always reaches the sea." She stared at the words, her heart racing. Was this a sign? A message from God? She didn't know what to think. But just as she was trying to make sense of it, Austin walked into the kitchen, his small voice breaking the silence. "Mommy, I'm hungry." It was such a simple sentence, But to Naya, it felt like the greatest miracle she had ever witnessed. Austin hadn't spoken in months. He had been locked in his own world, unreachable. But now here he was standing before her asking for food. Naya dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. It was a small thing, but it felt like the breakthrough she had been praying for. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Later that day, she took Austin to visit Alex in the hospital. He was still unconscious, his body weak from the treatments, but Naya held his hand, whispering to him softly, "I pray every day for a miracle, Alex. I've learned not to expect the grand ones, the kind where the seas part or the dead rise. But what if even the small ones are too far out of reach?" As she sat there, a doctor entered the room, overhearing her prayer. He looked at her with kind eyes and said, "A drum cannot beat if its skin is too tight or too loose. Your heart is that drum, Naya. You need balance, patience, for the time to heal." Naya looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "But how can I continue to believe when everything points to failure?" The doctor smiled gently. "Faith isn't about what you see. It's about what you know in your heart, even when the world around you says otherwise." That night, Naya went home with a renewed sense of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. The next morning, Austin, once again speaking more than he had in months, asked to visit his brother. Naya took him to the hospital, and as they stood by Alex's bed, Austin leaned over and whispered, "Get up, Alex. I miss you." And then, as if in response to his brother's plea, Alex coughed. It was weak, barely audible, but it was enough to send Naya rushing to call the doctor. They ran tests, and later that day, Naya and Jack were called into the hospital. The doctor looked at them, his face filled with disbelief. "In all my years of practice, I've never seen anything like this. Alex's condition has improved dramatically. It's almost as if his body is healing itself. He can go home in a day or two." Naya collapsed into Jack's arms, overwhelmed with gratitude. God has not abandoned us. Alex was going to live. It wasn't the grand, miraculous healing she had once prayed for, but it was a miracle nonetheless. Alex was discharged from the hospital, and day by day, both he and Austin showed signs of improvement. They continued therapy, and though the challenges remained, Naya saw their progress as a gift. Her boys were still different from other children, still autistic, but they were her miracles. Naya and Jack's faith, once shaken, had been restored. They realized that the miracle wasn't in changing their children, but in changing themselves. Their faith, once lost, had returned stronger than before, and with it, they found peace. Together, they began to share their story with others, offering hope to parents who had lost faith, telling them that with love, patience, and prayer, things could and would get better. And as Naya looked out at the tree in their yard, no longer barren, but filled with new leaves, she knew that the journey was far from over. But she also knew that they would make it through. After all, a tree that bends does not break, and a river that flows slowly always reaches the sea. Naya and Jack became advocates for families like theirs, speaking to those who felt isolated in their struggles, just as they once had. They reached out to support groups, churches, and communities, offering their experiences as a reminder that faith doesn't erase the challenges, but it gives you the strength to face them. Their message was simple. The miracle wasn't in changing their children, but in finding strength within themselves to carry on. Alex and Austin continued their therapy. There were days filled with progress, small victories that gave them reason to hope. Some days were harder, reminding Naya and Jack that the journey was far from over. But every moment of connection, every step forward, was a reminder of God's presence in their lives, even in the quiet, unseen ways. One afternoon, as Naya sat with Jack under the tree in their yard, she watched as their boys played together, still different from other children, still facing challenges, but full of life and love. The tree, once bare, now stood tall and full of leaves, a living symbol of their resilience. She looked over at Jack and smiled, squeezing his hand. "We've come so far," she whispered. Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on their sons. "And we'll keep going." As the sun set and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, Naya felt a deep sense of peace. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had the strength to face whatever came next together. The tree that bends does not break. The river that flows slowly will always reach the sea. And with faith, love, and patience, their family would keep moving forward, step by step, day by day. And in the quiet moments, Naya knew that their story, like so many others, was far from over. But with each new day came the promise of hope, a hope that they would carry with them, no matter how slowly the river of life flowed. The moral of this story is that life's most challenging moments often bring us to the brink of despair, making it seem like all hope is lost. But even in the darkest of times, we must remember that God's plan unfolds in ways we might not understand. His timing may not match ours, but He is always working behind the scenes, guiding us through our trials. Just like Naya and Jack, you may feel like your prayers are going unanswered, but small miracles happen every day, sometimes in ways we least expect. Healing may not always come in the form of a sudden miracle, but through growth, strength, and love that sustains us on the journey. The path is often long and filled with struggles, but if we keep faith and persevere, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Remember, a tree that bends under pressure doesn't break, and a river that flows slowly still reaches its destination. God is never late. He is always on time, and He will come through when you least expect it, offering you the strength and grace to keep moving forward. So hold on to faith. No matter how dim it may seem, better days are coming. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Kindly share your thoughts in the comments.